So, our next speakers are Maja and Reuben Fowkes, and before I give you the virtual floor, I will shortly introduce you. So, Maja and Reuben Fowkes are London-based curators, critics, and art historians who specialize in East Central European art history and contemporary art and ecology. They are also co-directors of the Translocal Institute for Contemporary Art, which is a center for transnational research into East European art and ecology. They had, in London, the Post-Socialist Art Centre at the Institute of Advanced Studies at University College London, and they were co-directors of the Getty Foundation Connecting Art Histories program. This once again, we try to do something. This is the problem with the projector, with the computer games. Nothing better than best. Okay. Okay. So once again, they were co-directors of the Getty Foundation Connecting Art Histories. It was funded with an international program by Getty, and it was called Confrontation Sessions in the East European Art History. It was based at the Post-Socialist Art Centre in London, and this was a program in which I was happy also to participate. Among the multitude of articles and books they authored and co-authored, I would like to mention the recent book Central and Eastern European Art since 1950, published in 2020. So, I hope that the connection will be all right, and I'm giving you the floor. Cannot hear them.
Okay.
Yeah, now it's fast. Okay, we can hear you.
Thank you. As you can hear us, well, we're really sorry not to be with you in person today, as Christian already mentioned, because we're really looking forward to seeing and catching up with so many friends and colleagues in Iași. And I'm also sorry not to see you in person, Tomek, and also finally to come to Iași. But thanks a lot to Tomek, to Paulina and Zsuzsa, and especially Christian for all the help and for organising our participation in this fascinating, promising conference. And today we want to talk about the exhibition 30 Victorious Years, an exhibition of engaged realist art from 10 socialist states that didn't shape the world.
So it was on the initiative of a meeting of ministers of culture from Socialist Bloc that an international exhibition of engaged realist painting was organized in Sofia in 1973, bringing together 535 artworks from 321 artists from Bulgaria, Cuba, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, GDR, Mongolia, Poland, Romania, Soviet Union, and Vietnam. It rematerialized 2 years later, in the summer of 1975 in Moscow, as an exhibition to mark 30 victorious years of socialist development since the end of the Second World War. The Moscow exhibition included the majority of the works from 1972 exhibition in Sofia, but expanded it to 1,700 works, and now including sculpture, graphics, posters along with painting, and from the same lineup of the countries. So under the same title, the exhibition traveled with slight alterations to scope to the other participating countries, starting with Berlin in autumn 1975, over to Prague, Budapest, Sofia, Lodz and Plovdiv, Bucharest, Warsaw, and it reached Havana in summer of 1978. We have, as of yet, no evidence that it went on to travel as originally planned to Ulaanbaatar and Vietnam.
Every exhibition data collected by the Office of Exhibitions of the Council of Socialist Culture and Education in Romania indicates there were 1,012 works shown. There were 600 people invited to the opening and around 25,000 visitors. A catalogue with a print run of 1,500 copies and a total of 16 reports in the media. These also included smaller articles and notifications, which could suggest that despite its grand ambitions, its grand agendas, the exhibition did not exactly shape the world. And although the reception of the exhibition did look in participating countries, generally it could be said that the exhibition did not leave a strong trace in the art history of socialism.
Nevertheless, delving into its complex histories raises some pertinent methodological questions. Firstly, through its dissented, circular and diffuse structure, exemplifying the internationalist praxis of the socialist art world that operated in an expanded geographical landscape, how does the exhibition contribute to the reassessment of East European art in the socialist period? How useful is it in opening up horizons away from the narrow national regional frameworks towards thinking in terms of the art of global socialisms and East European art as interconnected and interrelated to wider world art geographies?
And in terms of style, the exhibition also poses methodological challenges, especially in comparison to the art of high socialism of the early 1950s, for the analysis of which our historical tools are more readily at hand and already outlined. So how should the official, diplomatic, engaged, largely realist art of the late socialist period be approached and re-evaluated? What sets of coordinates could be established to address these art practices?
And finally, to what degree does the show offer a window of the concerns of the socialist world and could be approached as a valuable source for establishing our historical narratives through the lens of, for instance, gender, sexuality, race, consumerism, internationalism, and so on? And this is actually the main reason why we are drawn to investigate these exhibition histories in the first place.
But from our point of view, which arises from our work on the socialist Anthropocene, we are asking whether this kind of survey exhibition could serve as a basis to recreate the environmental art history of socialism. And in what way do these works document, articulate, and promote the socialist agenda of industrial development? And to what extent is it possible to detect, even in official, diplomatic, representative art of the late socialist period, a form of latent ecological critique?
The aims of the exhibitions were articulated in the introductory text to the catalogue of Bulgarian show of 1973, where it stated that by uniting the efforts of artists from socialist countries, the exhibition demonstrated the active role of realist art in the construction of socialist society, in the struggle for humanism and social progress, and as an active stimulus in the development of world artistic cultures. Realist engaged painting was seen as a counter to the devaluation of artistic values persistently imposed by authoritative international forums, in other words, the decadent values of the Western art world.
In the unattributed introduction to the catalogue of the Moscow exhibition, which was translated and printed unchanged in subsequent editions following the exhibition itinerary, and here you can see the cover of the Polish edition, one could read that the exhibition presents the general direction of development of socialist countries, the struggle to rebuild social relations, great economic and cultural achievements, and the unity of our nations in the fight against imperialism.
The exhibition also consisted of a retrospective part dealing with the anti-fascist struggles before liberation, which included a number of key works of high socialist realism as an attempt in practice to establish a genealogy of socialist art, revealing through the differences between the retrospective and contemporary sections the evolution of socialist artistic style and thematic concerns.
In the contemporary part, the themes were outlined as labour, humanity, revolution, family, peace, struggle, youth and the modern world, man and nature. As critics pointed out, in the national sections, the aim was not to offer a complete picture of the development of art in their countries, but to address the construction of socialism through the characteristic themes of the, quote, happiness of people's labour, the construction of socialism and communism, spiritual growth, and the improvement of the new person. These themes provided a rich opportunity for expressing the social, civil, moral problems of socialist reality, with the emergence of a new hero whose psychology is portrayed in all the complexity of emotional shades.
Among the works that might exemplify this new take on socialist art could be Lugnana Gancheva, Practical from 1971, showing two young couples who are not afraid to show their intimacy, dressed in fashionable figure-hugging outfits set against the modernist architectural background, and most definitely students enjoying the fruits of actual existing socialism, rather than self-sacrificing young engineers and visitors to factories and collective farms of an earlier generation. They express a sense of self-belief and confidence into socialist system that works for them, and they present a more relaxed and emancipated socialist every day.
One of the most popular and reproduced works in the exhibition was Nika Savitsky's Partisan Madonna, which indicates the appearance of a religious genre transformed into social iconography. And in the same context, Russell Lackner's contribution entitled Vietnam from the same year, which showed a tortured Vietnamese fighter as an expression of international solidarity with Vietnam, also had this religious iconography. The templates of a crucified Christ and Mother Mary were interpreted by GDL art critic Peter Price as socialist themes of the, quote, reflection of the suffering of the oppressed.
This was another of the favorites chosen by newspaper editors about Europe criminals working in tomorrow's street, which showed not the further imagined social future, but people living their lives in the midst of socialist construction. And here is the Hungarian version of the wedding theme by Ferenc Szalai, his wedding picture from 1967, which captured the solemnity of the moment, expressing the emotional complexity associated with post-socialist realist representations. The new somber mode was expressed in the same, by the same artist in meetings of the Agricultural Cooperative from 1961, very much capturing life after collectivization, a world away from the socialist realist depictions of, for instance, women tractor drivers. This showed that the late socialist art was allowed to express the sorrows and address the problems of socialist transformation, and actually, Szalai won a prize for his portraits in the first Bulgarian exhibition.
So even from these few examples, it is clear that critics were struggling to find points of cohesion in terms of the new style. During the Berlin edition of the exhibition, a conference was held on 26th of November 1975 between Soviet and East German art representatives, with a discussion led by artist Leah Grundy. Fritz Kramer, godfather of social tourism in East Germany, in his vice presidential address, repeatedly called it a wild exhibition, implying that late socialist art was too uncontrolled. This wildness and lack of fixed categories was, he stated, partly why critics writing in a West German art magazine could only laugh at the exhibition, to which his cryptic retort was, "He who laughs last, laughs best."
In more positive terms, critics celebrated the ideological unity and creative diversity on view in the exhibition and the new emphasis on creative individuality in socialist art, noting that in socialist art, starting from the 1960s, the role of artists' creative personality has been strengthened and interest in his subjective assessment of the depicted event or phenomenon has increased. In terms of style, giving a more nuanced view than that expressed in the catalogue intro, which describes socialist art as opposing the dehumanized art of the bourgeois world, the critics raised the possibility that hyperrealism and pop art could also be socialist, with the Soviet summary noting that, quote, some authors believe that certain techniques of late bourgeois art can contribute to expanding the arsenal of expressive means of socialist art.
What is more, in the context of an exhibition that brought together artworks from Europe, Asia, and America, East German scholars raised the question of the emergence of socialist art as a, quote, new, larger unity in the arts of our era, noting that while world socialist art or international socialist art has at its core the art of socialist states, it also includes socialist elements in the second culture of the capitalist countries. This statement shows the globalist pretensions of socialist art that could offer an alternative to what they called late bourgeois art. Interestingly, solidarity with Chile was expressed on a number of occasions, while China, Albania, and Yugoslavia were not mentioned or present in the show.
Another point raised in these discussions was the role of the audiences and the demand on viewers to engage with such practices, with critics noting that the viewers are required to actively and creatively perceive the works and mobilize intellectual and emotional force. They also remarked that the cultural growth of a viewer is an increasingly important factor in artistic life of socialist countries, suggesting that there was an idea of art education and that socialist exhibition goers were becoming more sophisticated in their tastes. And we think this is one of the major distinctive characteristics of the socialist art forms.
Returning now to the thematic aspect of the exhibition, in terms of industrial development, workers, industrialization, mechanization, and modernization, and also the sense of environmental side effects of these processes, we would like to make a number of points. Firstly, distinction can be made with the artworks of high socialist realism that engage in depictions of the drama of rapid industrialization, with the official narrative at the time relying on the cult of Stakhanovite laborers, the first being Alexei Stakhanov, who set the bar high in the Donbass coal mines, while in practice, industrialization relied heavily on volunteer brigades, collective farm workers, and gulag labor to achieve the goals of the first 5-year plans. These works set out to capture, socialist realist work, to capture the agency and vibrancy of the workers' efforts to build industrial infrastructures, generally depending on physical power of the worker using simple tools to achieve collective goals.
However, the works collected in 30 Victoria's Years exhibitions represents a different moment in history of industrial landscape under socialism, and workers are often portrayed not actually working, as in Victor Popov, the Builders of Rats from 1960, or the moment of leaving the workplace at the end of the shift, as the shift is over by Tahib Salahov, or not being too worried about achieving production goals, as in the Domanovsky's Howlers from 1976. Bulgarian artist Alexander Terziev's break at work really expressed the ideological softening of the socialist post-Stalin era, a less heroic phase of revolutionary progress in which workers often seem rather tired of building socialism.
It was not just workers that were changing, but also factories and the industrial landscape, with the motif of the building of new heavy industry complexes giving way to depictions that show the factory in its interaction with the environment, and even include more surrealistic elements that convey feelings of fear and menace associated with the fiery violence of the alchemic processes in chemical industrial plants, as in Veronetsova Chemikovsky steel complex from 1970. The density of this representation of the industrial transformation of Vietnam in Bui Tran Chuk's Center for Black Metallurgy in Phai Nguyen in 1962 feels excessive, with the mines and frenetic construction activities pushing the clouds and sky almost out of the picture. Tahir Salahov's Morning Train articulated the expansion of concrete infrastructures, increasing dependence on cars and trucks, and the constant flow of gas and oil tankers to fuel the petroleum-driven technological development of the socialist Anthropocene.
From the Polish examples, we can see the late socialist depictions of the chemical plant in Lodz, with the signature-style female figure adorning the industrial landscape in Wiesław Garba-Liński's Industrial Landscape from 1968, and the recent Putin's Petroleum Pipelines Friendship from 1964 depicts the building of the Druzhba pipeline on the Polish side, casting a rather dreary light on the friendship aspect of this endeavor.
The inclusion of František Gross in the Czechoslovak section of the exhibition, 30 Victoria's Years, was not surprising, considering his long-standing preoccupation with the industrial landscape, which the artist depicted in a modernist style derived from his interest in interwar cubist composition and surrealist aesthetics. This is visible in the geometrical forms, rhythmical composition, and simplified colour blocks of his work factories. Gross was one of the founders of Group 42, a Prague-based arts collective formed during World War II that had a thematic orientation towards the individual experience of the modern metropolis. In his late 40s work Founder, a dragline excavator takes centre stage, positioned on top of brown overburden, silhouetted against a turquoise grey sky basking in the sunshine. This new machine, developed for the open pit mining, is a giant overachieving technological apparatus and could be seen as heralding the displacement of the traditional miner on the model of Stacano in the economy as well as in art.
And here is a scooping stake on the same machine. And but we want to go back to Franz Gross. The proliferation of industrial themes in this practice was also discussed by Jerzy Balogh in the 1979 artist monograph, who pointed to the artist's attraction to the technical transformation of the surface of a landscape, as well as dominance of newly arising factory complexes. One such industrial plant in Zalushi near Most was portrayed in the work Chemical Plant in 1962 in his trademark strong colors and geometric lines, treatment which corresponds to the modernist aestheticization of industrial forms and visuality of technological sublime. The transformation of the Most basin could be seen as a marker of the unfolding of the socialist Anthropocene, with rapid expansion of alcohol strip mining in the post-war period, turning the region into a centerpiece for Stalinist heavy industry. That was a quote. Using massive modern machinery to remove millions of tons of soil overburden, the development completely reconfigured the terrain to the extent that, in some parts, agricultural lands and forests, which in 1900 had covered 95% of the surface of the land, were reduced to no more than 6% in the late 1970s, with the center of old city of Most itself being removed to free the access to the coal deficit below the streets. Already in the 1970s, Czech environmentalists listed the side effects of this development in changing the natural and chemical composition of the soil and the accumulation of toxic elements from flying ash, with most regions becoming synonymous with industrial devastation in the post-communist era.
In the 1930s, in the exhibition 30 Victorious Years, the artists also showed the painting Clement Gottwald's Methodological Complex, one of the largest smelting centres in the country. So in this painting, made during the restrictive normalisation era, one might find a glimpse of the latent environmental critique from the inclusion of discarded oil barrels in the foreground and the devastated pits, which on this occasion take central stage in the composition, while the actual factory is pushed into the background.
One of the standout works in the East German contribution to the same exhibition was Wolfgang Mattheuer's Prague landscape, which depicted the industrial landscape of a Siberian town that he visited in 1966 as part of an official delegation to mark the completion of the major infrastructural project of the Prague hydroelectric dam.
So there were several artists on the study trip who mostly offered an uncritical depiction of the transformed socialist landscape. Mattheuer's painting was a more complex and multi-layered work, which East German art critics recognized at the time as one of the main achievements in socialist realism, which in the GDR in the 60s, as they claimed, saw the development of new forms of artistic expression, and Mattheuer is a leading example. The painting is horizontally divided into two zones. The sky takes up the full half of the canvas, while the land is depicted in the lower part. Both are intersected diagonally with a concrete pipe and electric cables pointing towards the industrial complex in the background. Although it contains many of the familiar elements of a socialist industrial landscape, including newly built roads and a green train heading towards the dam, and also traversed by railway tracks but out of sight, the central scene of the painting diverges from this norm. We see children playing on the remains of industrial debris, discarded building materials and broken pipes, as well as an uprooted tree.
Although many socialist critics try to interpret the painting as a portrayal of the joy of life, reading the children's play as a symbol of carefree future, a less ideological interpretation might suggest that the gathering clouds and the enormous expanses of barren industrial wasteland that overwhelm the signs of socialist progress reveal a more dystopian perspective. It refuses complicity in the denial of environmental impact of building an industrial city in the middle of the pristine wilderness of the Siberian taiga, a miserable outpost in harsh climate constructed to extract energy from the river. More deeply hidden still were the earlier histories of the settlement, which in the late 40s functioned as gulag, where prison laborers, including prisoners of war, worked to construct railways across this landscape.
A similar unsettling impression emanates from his painting A Tree is Proved from 1972, which again consists of a central stage and a background depicting a cityscape with an industrial complex towering over it, which stretches over the landscape and also emerges from the sky. The foreground contains a dense scene of a man on the top of a birch tree in the process of cutting the last of its branches, while a grandfather and a child cut them up and presumably burn them on the bonfire. Reportedly, the usual reaction to the painting was a speculation about how would the man get down from the tree when he cut down all the branches, which could be seen as an implicit environmental commentary. The work could also be seen as a metaphor about human responsibility for the devastation of the natural world and the careless wastage of resources.
So, to conclude, the late socialist realist art, freed from the constraints of literal depictions of socialist progress, and we see this in the Mongolian work by Chagom in the Gobi Desert, where the progress is portrayed as a little bit more problematic, with the car breaking down in the center of the image and is not so smooth. This proved to be a vehicle for the expression of ecological doubt, and although not articulated as strongly as would be found in contemporary neo-avant-garde practices, which were much more explicit in that sense. However, although ignored and overlooked, this exhibition of 30 victorious years can serve as a rich source for rethinking both environmental and, in general, a global art of the late socialism.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Maja and Reuben, for your intriguing case.